letzter Teil heute Abend unserer Talk-Diskursreihe Artgenossinnen, diesmal mit Maskenpflicht im Publikum. Und aus Solidarität können wir ja auch zu Hause eine Maske tragen. Herzlich willkommen. Ja, macht doch Spaß. Herzlich willkommen auch im Stream an alle, die zugucken. Freut mich, dass so viele dabei sind. Wir haben diesen Talk heute vor uns als krönenden Abschluss unserer doch immerhin 5-teiligen Diskursserie, die wir hier hinlegen. Und wir werden den zum Großteil auf Englisch machen. Die Introduction mache ich allerdings auf Deutsch. Da tue ich mich auch leichter. Wir haben uns die letzten Wochen, nee, nicht die letzten Wochen, die letzten Tage, um Gottes Willen, was wäre das, wenn wir das wochenlang machen müssten? Wir haben uns die letzten Tage sozusagen vom Anthropozän immer weiter wegbewegt zu dem, was Donna Haraway mit dem Cthulhuzän versucht zu beschreiben oder auszurufen. Wir haben uns im ersten Teil dieser Reihe mit Machtverhältnissen unter dem Titel Supremacy beschäftigt und auch mit Fragen der Ethik und Moral zwischen Mensch und dem, was wir Natur nennen, zwischen Mensch und Tier. Wir haben im zweiten Schritt uns überlegt, wie sehen Arbeitsbeziehungen zwischen Mensch und Tier auf Augenhöhe aus, und wir sind im dritten Schritt gestern Abend in einem völlig wilden Gespräch, was ganz toll war, haben wir uns mit speziesübergreifender oder interspezieller Solidarität, mit Empowerment beschäftigt und begrüßen hier noch ein paar Nachzüglerinnen. Alles gut, alles gut. Und jetzt sind wir heute quasi in the middle of it. Wir werden heute über das sprechen, was Donna Haraway meint, wenn sie von SF spricht und von Cthulhuzän und von den Tentakulären. Wir reden über Spekulation, wir reden über Dinge, die irgendwo on the brink oder in the middle zwischen Mensch, Tier, Natur, Technik passieren. Und das ist schon falsch in dem Moment, wo ich es sage, weil es geht ja gerade darum, diese Taxonomien und Kategorien aufzulösen und miteinander im wahrsten Sinne des Wortes, das werden wir gleich sehen, zum Tanzen zu bringen. Herzlich willkommen. And now I will switch to English because we have some people in Zoom with us. And so we will switch to them as well. Hallo Spela Petrič, hallo Flo Kreier und hallo Reiner Matysik. Ich darf jetzt erstmal vielleicht noch ganz kurz als Entschuldigung voranschicken, Steinmaßl, die heute hätte da sein sollen, ist leider krank, kein Covid, aber wir haben mustergültigen Ersatz gefunden. Sehr praktisch und sehr direkt und einfach mustergültigen Ersatz gefunden, den Florian, der ja auch morgen den Abend hier bestreiten wird. Also schön, dass du hier dabei bist und spontan eingesprungen bist. Ich darf euch vorstellen, als erstes beginne ich mal. Ach so, ich wollte auf Englisch jetzt weitermachen. Gell? I will start with Reiner because he's sitting next to me. Hello, welcome. Reiner, you are an artist.
Good evening.
Sehr gut ins Mikro gesprochen. Herzlichen Applaus, genau. Reiner, you are an artist. You were born in Duisburg, as I read, and you are making sculptures, but you have a kind of big and diverse body of work, I would say. You're making, besides the sculptures, you're making film, photography, drawings and writing, and performances as well. And in the core of your work, as I can say, there are some kind of biomorphic sculptures. You're making design sketches or designs for non-existing or not yet existing organisms. We will go into that work later, but you examining the question of man-made evolution in your work. That's one of the questions you're examining. And you're also a teacher. You work as a professor for three-dimensional design, material form object at the University of Art and Design Burg Giebichenstein in Halle in Eastern Germany. Welcome in Austria, welcome in Salzburg. Reiner Maria Matysik. Jetzt nochmal Applaus.
Thank you.
Then we have with us Spela Petrič. Where are you? In Amsterdam you are right now, right?
Yes.
Yes.
So
it's getting more and more international. Great. Spela Petrič is based in Ljubljana and Amsterdam. You're coming from Slovenia. And on the one hand, you have a PhD in biology. You're a postdoc researcher at the Smart Hybrid Forms Lab in Amsterdam. what's that all about? We'll talk about that later. And you are working as an artist, of course. That's the reason why we invited you. And you describe yourself as new media artist, and you're combining natural science as a biologist, that's for sure, I guess, wet biomedia practices and performances, and your goal is to critically examine the limits of anthropocentrism. So that's the point where we started on Thursday with the festival. And you got an award of distinction at the Ars Electronica some years ago for a project which is called Play. And we'll have a look at that project a little closer in the next minutes. Welcome, Spela Petrič. Now I have to change my notes because those were the facts on Sue, but we greetings to Sue and get well soon very quickly, speedy recovery from us. Florian, you are an artist as well, of course. You studied politics, philosophy, literature in Munich, and you worked as a radio journalist. You worked and work as a curator and founder of the Panama Plus Festival in Munich, which combines music, film, politics, and visual arts. And you are basically a musician. You are part of a group called Aloha Input, which happens to have a concert here, hopefully, on December the 17th with your new album, Devil's Diamond Memory Collection. And you have a big singer-songwriter project, which is Angela Augs. You have been here before at ARGE 2 years ago in October with your latest album in the Rote Salon right here on this stage. And you will be here tomorrow with a new project which has its premiere next month, hopefully, at the Münchner Kammerspiele, which is called Introduction to the Future Self. And a kind of basic version of this project will be our festival closing tonight in the Saal above us. So you're all invited to come. And the reason why you're here is that you also worked with Sue Steinmaßl on the film we will watch afterwards. The Future is Not Unwritten. You made texts and musics for that film. And this film is, as I can describe, a smart film. What is a smart film? It's a film generated by an artificial intelligence. It uses neural networks, machine learning, and deep learning code, and it's endlessly. It never ends. It started in 2017 and is currently rendered somewhere on a computer till there is no electricity anymore, perhaps, or even longer. And we will watch that film later, of course, not in full duration, but a small glimpse of it. The screencast version number 63, as I was told. Welcome here, Florian.
Welcome.
So this is our panel, and as you see, we were starting with nature science in the first place, and sociology and other scientific fields and areas, and we finally came to the arts and to something in between all the arts involved. Before we start into the talk, I would switch to German later, because we actually never read something from Donna Haraway's book on stage, which is kind of sad, and I will do that now because I thought it would be a good moment to just read her text. I will do that in German because it's hard enough to understand it in German for me and probably for you as well. And I will read a passage, a very dense passage. I will read it slowly, where she is, first of all, talking or exclaiming the Cthulhucene, where she is talking about the tentaculars and SF and about speculation. So that's the topic of today's talk, and I will read it, and you will listen, and you will try to understand it, I hope. Okay, let's try. And for those of you who have been here before, you probably will recognize the one or the other sentence. So she's firstly introducing the Cthulhucene here in this text, and she writes, in translation of Karin Harasser: Der erste vertraute Dämon, den ich aufrufe für dieses Cthulhucene, ist eine Spinne, die unter Stümpfen in den Rotholzwäldern von Sonoma und den Mendocino Countys in der Nähe meines Wohnorts in Nordzentralkalifornien lebt. Pimoa Cthulhu. Und jetzt kommt schon ein Satz, den wir schon gehört haben. Niemand lebt überall. Jeder lebt irgendwo. Nichts ist mit allem verbunden. Alles ist mit etwas verbunden. Nobody lives everywhere. Everybody lives somewhere. Nothing is connected to everything. Everything is connected to something. Diese Spinne lebt an einem Ort, bewohnt einen Ort, aber trägt einen Namen, der faszinierende Reisen anderswohin ermöglicht. Diese Spinne wird mir mit dem Erkunden und Zurückkehren helfen, mit Wurzeln und Wegen. Die achtbeinige tentakuläre Arachnoide, auf die ich mich hier berufe, erhält ihren generischen Namen von den Goshute aus Utah, das ist ein Indian Tribe. Wenn ich eine kleine Veränderung in der taxonomischen Schreibweise vornehme von, und auch das hatten wir schon, Cthulhu zu Cthulhu, sie verschiebt da ein H innerhalb des Wortes. Wenn ich also Pimoa Cthulhu schreibe, dann entwerfe ich einen Namen für ein Anderswo, für ein Anderswann, das war, immer noch ist und sein könnte. Das Cthulhu-Zähn. Ich erinnere mich daran, dass Tentakel vom lateinischen Tentaculum kommt, was Fühler bedeutet, und von Tentare das Tasten und Ausprobieren meint. Und ich weiß, dass meine langbeinige Spinne vielarmige Verbündete hat. Unzählige Tentakel werden notwendig sein, um die Geschichte des Cthulhu-Zähns zu erzählen. We probably remember now the octopus of Saturday. Die Tentakulären verwickeln mich in SF. Da kommt's, SF. Ihre Gliedmaßen sind Spielfäden in Fadenfiguren. String Figures, SF. Sie verwickeln mich in Poesis, in das Herstellen von spekulativen Fabeln, Speculative Fabulation, Science Fiction, Science Fact, spekulativen Feminismus, Speculative Feminism, bis jetzt, so far. Alles ist F. Die Tentakulären verbinden und entbinden sich. Sie machen Schnitte und Knoten, sie machen Unterschiede. Sie weben Pfade und Konsequenzen, aber keine Determinismen. Sie sind gleichzeitig offen und verknüpft auf die eine Art und Weise und nicht auf die andere. Nothing is connected to everything, everything is connected to something. SF ist Geschichten erzählen und Fakten erzählen. Es ist das Muster möglicher Welten und Zeiten, materiell-semiotischer Welten, vergangener, gegenwärtiger und kommender Welten. Ich verwende String Figures, die haben wir auch schon kennengelernt mehrfach, als eine theoretische Trope, als eine Art und Weise, Denken mit, als sympoetisches Verheddern, Verfilzen, Verwirren, Nachspüren und Sortieren mit zahlreichen GefährtInnen zu betreiben. Ich arbeite mit und in SF als materiell-semiotischer Kompostierung, als Theorie in Schlamm und Durcheinander. Die Tentakulären, wer sind diese Tentakulären? Sind keine entkörperten Figuren, also nicht nur eine bloße Vorstellung. Sie sind Nesseltiere, Spinnen, fingernde Wesen, beispielsweise Menschen und Waschbären, Tintenfische, Quallen, neuronale Extravaganzen, faserige Gebilde, Peitschenwesen, myofibrilläre Verflechtungen, verfilzte mikrobische und fungale Gewirre, sondierende Kriecher, Critter, anschwellende Wurzeln, emporstrebende Kletterranken. Die Tentakulären sind auch Netze und Netzwerke, IT-Critter innerhalb und außerhalb von Wolken. Tentakularität handelt vom Leben entlang von Linien, einem so großen Reichtum von Linien und so weiter und so weiter und so fort. Das geht dann noch ein paar hundert Seiten so weiter. Ja? So right now we're right in the middle. She's writing what all these tentaculars are, and we have animals, as you might have heard. We have also plants, faserige Gebilde, and we have IT-Critter, networks, neuronal networks inside and outside of clouds. So also that what we might call technical devices or robots or artificial intelligence is in the core of SF. And that's the point where we start our discussion. First of all, I would come, we'll do it like that we just introduce the work of each of you, and then we get into the talk. And I think we'll start with Spela right now. You have prepared a little clip or some images to get more in touch with your great work. Spela, you're welcome.
Yeah, I hope I don't overwhelm you, but I thought that images would speak louder or more precisely.
I already did that before, so don't mind if you do.
Okay. So I'll share my screen. Here we go. So I hope you can see it. So I'll just briefly explain a little bit about my practice. A while ago, I started by asking myself, how come we always seem to ignore plants? And that led me to a series called Confronting Vegetal Otherness, where I actually tried to unpack our plant blindness by several artistic experiments that enacted strange relations between plants and people at different levels of different scales, basically at different organismal levels. So, for example, one was Scotopoesis, where I stood for 20 hours in front of cress, casting a shadow on it, performing basically biosemiosis. So my shadow was signaling to the cress of my presence, and that actually left an imprint in the cress's bodies as well as my own, just to say, you know, yes, the cress actually notices me. In this next piece called Phytoteratology, I used biochemical or biotechnological protocols to make plant-human babies, which weren't necessarily or weren't at all genetic hybrids, but were questioning this sort of environmental epigenetic transmogralization. So these are the phytopollutants. So they're actually 100% genetically tail cress or Arabidopsis thaliana, but they have been conceived in artificial uteruses, which were swimming with my own hormones that I isolated from urine. So I made plant-human monsters in order to question this make kin, not babies, but what if we make kin while also making babies? And yet a different conception of this kinship that is based on a materiality that isn't as reductive as just DNA. And in Strange Encounters, we had sort of a micro performance unfold under the microscope where it was human cancer cells and an algae meeting. And I thought this was also an interesting experiment where actually both both types of organisms in vitro, in tissue culture, are basically the raw materials. So in a way, the status of this human as well as the plant in tissue culture is very much similar. And so from this series, I started asking myself, not so much, or as a result of this series, not so much how plants and people are different and how they oppose each other, but under which conditions we actually find ourselves in a very similar position. And simultaneously, as we are sort of uncovering our embeddedness in this algorithmic reality, I came to see similarities between plants and people as we are rendered in the eye of the algorithm. So while we might be facing this intimacy now for the first time, it seems, plants have been observed by machines for as long as they could have been, right? So with the advent of agriculture, and here on the slide, you see several of robots that tend to plants in agriculture at every stage of their growth. This is also something that scientists have been using to promote these advanced technologies such as that AI in order to heighten our awareness of plants, in a way to overcome this plant blindness, right? And they're using things like the emailing spinach or the twittering tree to sort of interface measurements of these plants and on the other hand, create this narrative where finally, through technology, a channel of communication that otherwise wasn't there would be opening up. So this is where I start presenting to you the Plant Machine series. And the first one could be understood as a response to this. And I will now show you a video.
Mama, mogoče ga. Spodaj se vidi ga, mama, ga.
So this is from a work. Okay, this is from a work called Institute for Inconspicuous Languages, Reading Lips. And it's about literally reading the lips of plants. These lips are in fact stomata or leaf pores, and there's thousands on every leaf on the underneath usually. And basically they're holes into the leaf through which the plant breathes, and also transpiration is really important for it to be able to get water. But, you know, we cannot really avoid not recognizing them as sort of mouths, especially when they are observed in this time-lapse manner, which they were so sped up. The opening and closing is sped up. And so this lip reader, initially it was meant as just using an open source algorithm called LipNet. It's a neural network that has been trained on human lips to understand what people are saying. But alongside this algorithm, we also used, or we asked an interpreter for the deaf to read lips. And reading lips is very difficult. So the point of this humorous artwork was to also, in this process of trying to communicate with plants, bring into attention that we are actually, on one hand, communicating with them through our chemicals, through this, you know, co-evolution that has left the channels of communication open. At the same time, we seem to insist on using this logocentric principle of communication, which is kind of blind in itself. The next project takes sort of another step into this digital biosurveillance realm in which we find ourselves. And it actually asks for the help of these beautiful potted plants, which I call the plants of Instagram, and which we have been collecting, at least me and I guess a lot of us during COVID. So they're sort of usually from the tropics, and they have been proven to withstand these kind of quite difficult conditions in our houses and thrive despite actually being very far from their motherlands. So I was considering what their status actually is as pets or as companions or perhaps as bioworkers. And while at the same time I was also reflecting this biosurveillance that is offered by just our phones, which we keep always very close, and they monitor our steps, they monitor when and how we sleep, so our daily rhythms. And so I came across this clip.
Americans have Fitbits and pedometers in order to track their physical activity.
But as CBS 4's Gilma Abelos reports, some people have figured out how to earn steps without ever taking one.
This man isn't doing laundry. He's asked us not to show his face because of what he is doing with his company-issued step tracker.
Put the Fitbit in a sock, hour and a half on no heat setting in the dryer, 11,000 steps. Thank you.
He's earning 11,000 steps without moving. As is the case for many employees, his pedometer is linked to company insurance incentives that can lower his payments.
You are now more involved in, well, how much is this bill? How many steps?
Companies benefit from a healthy workforce, and many are rewarding workers with freebies for getting fit. But there's also a growing movement online to cheat the system.
We're starting with 3,472 steps.
We were curious, do the hacks even work? So we ran our own unscientific test.
This does still take some effort on your part to sit here and press this button for a while. Okay, there's a minute. 35:41.
That equals about 70
So,
steps.
Clearly, it was obvious that what we had to do is connect these Fitbits to plants, right? So we were measuring actually the excitation potential of plants, and according to how much of this electrochemical potential we registered, this would be translated into more or less pressing of this drill machine, and the Fitbit that was on the other end of the drill machine would actually send then the information of these steps to 12 different applications. So in a way, this was a hack because the algorithms themselves are indifferent to the organism that produces the data. They really can't tell immediately, right? So it was kind of a question if these algorithms, if we're all caught in surveillance capitalism and this is meant to produce, I don't know, behavioral surplus, which at the end, molds our desire. What happens if instead of human users, it's plants that start using these Fitbits? Will this self-regulating free market start caring about what plant desire is? And finally, I would like to share this latest project, which is summarized in a video, which I will hopefully play for you. Yes.
Play, PLAI, is the latest in a series of artworks that explore automated logic in its manifestations through and with living bodies. The overarching plant-machine project dwells on the recent transformation in computer science that has shifted from calculation towards adaptive practices of learning from data, which introduces multiple new strands of machine reasoning with far-reaching effects. The ability of neural networks to wield open-ended data without preset axioms has so far mainly been analyzed for its capacity to intensify capitalist extraction. However, since we cannot escape the logic of algorithms, it is urgent that we not only investigate the properties of this techno-power, but also search for possible adverse ontological emergence that could counteract this subsumption. In other words, how to resist by thinking and allying with the demons of the pandemonium. In the plant-machine project, the focus on plants as living agents exposed to the machine gaze harkens to the use of automation in industrial farming, yet subverts the epistemic framework of science and engineering by making the construction strive for plant pleasure, representation, and play. The impetus to observe plants and artificial intelligence at play stems from Dutch philosopher Johan Huizinga's writing on the notion of play as an expression of bodies driven by sheer joy and intensity. He sees play as prior to culture and yet not defined by biological necessity. This articulation of freedom, however, also comes with a risk of transformation, because we do not know in advance how bodies will act or what the implications of their encounter will be. In Play, PLAI, a posse of engineers, artists, programmers, and designers explore possibilities of play between cucumber plants and a naive AI robot moving at their pace. The vegetal world expresses behavior through movement by growth. In vining cucumbers, tendrils develop opposite each leaf and search for surfaces to grab hold of while the plant stretches towards the light. This evident expression of environmental inquiry isn't yet fully explained in science, but offers the indeterminacy that allows us to accept plant play as a possibility. The robot as human prosthesis approaches the cucumbers by complementing plant architecture with repeating elements that adopt new tasks as the interaction develops. 36 individually controlled stainless steel wires suspended from above the patch of cucumbers move at the rate of 1 centimeter an hour. The robot's control center starts as a blank slate, a bare neural network primed to learn of and from the plants. The robot senses the cucumbers in 3 dimensions with a laser scanner. The so-called LiDAR images are fed to an autoencoder, which is a simple neural network that creates the compressed latent space of the plant surface, a sort of abstract function of the actual plants. The algorithm then samples this abstraction and approaches the cucumbers by moving the balls according to its prediction. Upon grabbing hold of a wire, the plants give feedback to the neural network through an element called the classifier, which influences the shape of the latent space. Besides this, the tendril touching a ball serves as a visual cue that instructs the robot to stop moving it, thus gradually transforming the robot's tendrils into a cucumber trellis to support their growth. The play between the cucumber and robot leaves morphological traces in the shape of the plants, the steel strings, and the neural network. As the cucumbers grow and adapt to the tendrils of the machine, as the algorithm develops according to the feedback given by the plants, we witness the transformation of their constraints. We encounter the opening up of another temporality, neither that of a plant nor of a machine alone, already mutated by their needs and desires, and by our own implication in the possibility of their joy.
Okay, you're done?
So, yes, thank you very much.
That always leaves me kind of speechless, but I have to moderate this talk, so I have to talk. Thank you very much for this work, and as you might have heard, we had a lot of keywords coming up in what you told us about your work, like language and like play and pleasure and joy and industrial farming and all those keywords which have to happen here before the last few days. So something comes together, hopefully. Thank you. We'll come to you later. And then welcome Reiner again. Let's talk about your work a little bit. First of all, you are, as I told you, making biomorphic sculptures, and you're making designs for non-existing or not yet existing organisms, and your homepage is full of those organisms. How many have you made of those?
Well, it's a bit like the attempt to give this flora fauna, like you have all the species of the whatever, of Austria, of the mountains, of the seaside, and you collect them all and you make this compendium of species and organisms. And I try to do the same with organisms that are meant to be existing and they are not yet existing. So I'm kind of playing around the idea that anyway we are putting so many transgenetic organisms into our world, that we are living with all these man-made biological entities, that I would like to enhance this in a way that, and this is maybe close to the idea of plants playing, that they have no commercial reason, no medical reason, they are nothing of any mean in an economic, in a social surrounding towards the human being. They are just there, left to be with us without any means, any reason, just to have like the ability to use what we anyway can do in a playful way.
And what you're also doing, you're describing those objects as they were existing and as they have, or as they would have a function on your website. And I've found, which is quite nice, one of them is called Osculum apertum, which is open little mouth, so which resembles to the lip sync work. And you're right, the sac creature Osculum apertum excretes liquid threads from gland-like structures in order to maintain contact with smooth or steep surfaces, and so on and so on. So that's what is first? Is the idea of a body or the sculpture the first thing you do, or is it like the invention of what the sculpture is meant to be, and then you sculpture it?
Well, of course, if you're thinking about some other species, organism to be part of us, there needs to be a description of a gap or some like a strategy for survival. And so I'm thinking along of phenotype models, like prototype models, of the description, how they entangle into this world and how they find their place. And sometimes they even may have some deed to do, something they offer, and sometimes they just are very smart to find a gap or to like live in a terrain in a way maybe that there is some hope that they could find a good life.
And which materials do you work with?
Well, anything, like can be children's plasticine, can be a 3D program, can be living material, like anything.
And living material, that's another thing. You're working a lot with plans as well, not also with not existing or not yet existing objects or organisms, but you're working with plants, and you have made some performances with trees, and the basic idea was to get the trees more in touch with the human body. What did you do there?
Yeah, I was very thankful to Spela again for this. How do you call this? The king, like the plant. How you call the plant domain? The plant. Vegetation.
Sorry, what?
You have this term.
Vegetarian.
You see.
That
yes,
one?
yes. So for me, it was like a biocratic society for the humans. Like we are based on the biological entity we are, and we are in a way restricted very often. So we have this organism, and we cannot really interact with this other organism. We saw in the theater yesterday a relation to dogs. We breed dogs. We are kind of inheriting them. But with plants, it's different. I mean, we don't have this close contact to plants. They don't have eyes. They can not look back to us. Unless they're in pots, they are like immobile, like our houses. So I thought, okay, so what can I do to get into another kind of contact with the plants? And so I offered performances for like people in a situation that was like exhibition situation. There are plants in spring, in autumn. You can dig them out. You take them to another place, you dig them in again. But in between, they're moving like animals, like humans, or we bring them wherever we want. So we have this naked plant, and we can deal with it in a certain way. So what can we do? We can offer this plant to become the ground or something close to this ground. So let's say the belly of the plant is the roots. They are pushing into the ground. So they go into the ground and they get nutrition. They don't eat like we have to kill, we have to eat plants or animals or humans, but we don't do this. So, so the plants, they are better off. They can just use minerals and other, like water and something else, and the sunlight. So anyway, they don't have the problem we have morally, but they have their stomach and they push it and grow it into the ground. So, and I thought, okay, so maybe we can be the ground. So we have some openings in our body. We have some liquids or solid ground within us, so we can offer this to the plants.
Look inside your head. What images come up in your mind, and then you continue, please.
And I did this in certain different ways, in certain different situations. And one I will just describe close is you are in a situation where you can lay down in a forest on some lee, and you got offered one of these plants without earth on their roots, and you take this little tree and you're laying on the back and you're watching, like you're looking into the sky or into the trees, and you get this one tree, this little tree, into your mouth. So in a way, left eye, tree, right eye, you're laying under this tree, and the tree is rooted in your mouth. And this is a situation I was offering to people. And it's a bit like this tactile thing, you know. It's like if you do sculpture, it's not about looking. You cannot look at a sculpture. To understand a sculpture, you have to touch it. And you touch it maybe in a certain situation because of insurance or whatever with your eyes. But you touch it, and if not, if somebody, like if the guard is around the corner, you have to touch it, you have to feel it. So this is really the importance of working, because it's this other thing in the same space we are, and it's even more if this thing is alive. So I think the goal is to work on living sculptures, but as this is quite complicated to reach, it's also fine to work in an analog way, like that you give the illusion of what would happen if this is just the maquette for something living entity to be. Like, yeah.
So you're giving the plants, the humans give the plants the nutrition from their body, which is kind of we talked about making kin, or we're talking about making kin and about relations and about, for example, pets, dogs, and your relation as to them as children, and as well you're feeding the plants with your spit. So you're kind of a mother or father maybe to them. That's very interesting in the framework of this festival. Thank you so far for presenting your work, Reiner Maria Matysik. Applause, please. And Florian, now it's your turn. You stepped into Sue's place for tonight as a good substitute. It's a bit awkward to ask you about Sue's project, but as we show it afterwards, it's probably good to explain how this came into being and what your role was inside the project. Florian, please. I think you have to unmute.
Yeah.
Yes.
I am sorry. Hello. Sue got the invitation to live in a house, and she had to have an idea before, and her idea was that we could try to create something with people who can code this, that we can have something she would call a smart film, a movie that is kind of narrating in an automatic way. And this was basically the idea, and then it turned a really huge project, and turned into a really huge project. And my role was to do research. We would start to research about this whole idea of transhumanism, because this was really interesting for us in the beginning, to understand how people who would be experts from having ideas or are in contact with lots of entrepreneurs or coding people, how they would understand a computer-generated narration could be like or could look like. And this was basically the start. We did a lot of research. Of course, we read a lot of people, crazy people like Ray Kurzweil and friends. And we then found out those are basically men, and they're basically white, and they would all have a very harsh background somehow. It's nothing I want to talk about too much, but I think then on this way we stepped into the work of Donna Haraway as well, because she's for us it was very clear that she was kind of an opposite way to it, some sort of alternative to this way of a synthetic, computer-based, and very materialistic and mechanic way of thinking and narrating. I hope this was a good response to your question.
Okay, yeah. We will have a look into the film or a little part of it later. What is interesting is that that Donna Haraway in this book or in those texts I mentioned that earlier distances herself from the word transhumanism as she does it with Anthropocene. I read that before, but I'm switching to German again. All die sehnig-tentakulären, so that's the part of the text continuing where I stopped before. All die sehnig-tentakulären haben mich mit dem Posthumanismus unglücklich werden lassen. Obwohl vieles, was unter diesem Label entsteht, meine Arbeit bereichert. Mein Partner Rustin Hognes hat Kompost statt Posthumanismus oder Posthuman vorgeschlagen, sowie Humusismen statt Humanismen. Und ich bin in diesen wurmigen Haufen gesprungen. Das Humane als Humus hat Potenzial, wenn es gelingt, das Humane als Homo zu zerhacken und zu zerschreddern. Dieses stagnierende Projekt eines sich selbst erzeugenden und den Planeten zerstörenden Unternehmers. Das ist meine Ansage. From transhumanism or posthumanism to compost. That's where you come into into the situation again, because you were talking about the plants and you were talking about openings of the body before. Can you tell a little more, Reiner, about the other performance?
Yeah, the other performance. Yes. The other performance took place once in Brandenburger Kunstverein in Potsdam. And it was an exhibition, and it was a symposium of 2 days. And I was staying in a tent, and in this tent there was a lot of packed soil and plants, like little trees. And I was offering one of the audience people to come into this tent, and we were like in two, in this very like close situation with these trees and the soil, and I was asking about the situation. So how could you have this intimate contact to this plant, and what could you offer this plant? And so I was suggesting that you could offer this plant some nutrition from your anus. And so the people were like really thinking about, do I want to do this now? Do I don't want to do this? Do I think about this generally, and maybe I do this at home, whatever. And yes, so this was the situation, and of course, while I was in this row of meetings individually, I was myself experiencing this to like go this step I was offering to others myself also. Yes.
But was there somebody trying this out in the tent?
There was long thinking sometimes, but in the end, I mean, it's like this. I mean, you prefer to do this alone and not with somebody.
Of of course.
You don't know, like, I mean, some strange artist you met the first time. So yes, I think it was more about this really considering this and having this feeling. As I said with the sculpture, you can touch it without touching it. You can touch it with your eyes. And you had this situation, it was very close, the plants were there, everything was prepared, and you were just like, you know, like, yeah, I can more than now listening to the story of somebody telling me when I'm in the situation. It's just the yes or maybe or not yet. And this is quite different. You have the smell, you have all this earth, this strong smell, you have this little tent and this intimate situation. And I think it's about this atmosphere as well. And this atmosphere was inviting, and with this conversation, it was very like suggesting and opening ways, and so yes, nobody did it.
But it's about the encounter and the possibility. Spela, you have created this amazing work, Play, which is an encounter between cucumber plants and an artificial intelligence. What would be the next step in it? Would there be an encounter with a human as well in the framework of this? Could you give me the opportunity to dance with the cucumbers as well?
Well, I mean, the whole project is exactly about the human encounter with the plant, only because we can't really move at plant space, nor can we hold this attention, right? We make this machine and place an AI in it, a robot, and then that is what plays with the plant. So it's very much about us playing with the plant through this instrument that we've created, right? And as a reminder that it is already ménage à trois, we have the bouncy balls, right? And at the interstices of the plant and the machine, it's like our human desire that makes this thing happen in the first place.
So it's kind of conceptualized in a McLuhan way. The AI is the extension of men or of me in the encounter with the cucumber. Yeah.
I mean, in this sense, right? I think that there's a lot of narratives and tropes. That I would say the most popular ones are the ones that actually consider AI as autonomous, or, you know, right before they become autonomous. But I see it at the moment as more of a really sophisticated way of expressing human agency. Because of the social and political implications, I think that is sort of the responsible or the urgent way of conceptualizing them. It's not that I think that this is the only way to look at it, but from the perspective of biopolitics, you know, from the perspective of these insidious ways in which algorithms are utilized in our societies, I think that is sort of like the focus of my work at the moment.
But that's an interesting question relating to the future is not unwritten, Florian, because is the AI you created or Sue has created with the other co-workers of your project, is it autonomous in a kind of way, or is it an expression of the artist's work, which is Sue and her team? Or in which degree is it a prolonging of a certain artistic vision which comes from a human mind?
Yeah, that's a very interesting question. I'm not a coder. I'm not really able to speak about these certain things. But what was very interesting for us is that the way people approach it, because it really depends on what people think artificial intelligence is, and if they think it's an autonomous, very wise and intelligent entity, then they are really interested in what this entity is trying to tell them, and this leads to very interesting question afterwards, after people have watched the movie, for example. And of course, it's a work that was created in 2017, and I'm not sure how much this whole thing developed from there until now, but yeah, it's a sort of narration that is interacting with these, as I would call it, pieces or figures of machine learning that were easy to approach back then.
Let's go into talk a little bit more. What I would like to have is that you question your work among yourselves, among you three artists. Where do you? Is there any connection to? Oh, did anybody of you just say something? No. Okay. Is there a part of your work where, as you said, you're working with 3D printers and so on, where this technical aspect comes into contact with your work? Reiner?
Well, you were presenting one of these models of organisms to be, and okay, first I was working on them with plasticine so that I have a phenotype figure, I have a text that describes possibilities, and then like I thought, okay, it's not a sculpture because you don't know if somebody really wants to make this organism as a living being. Then we have the sculpture, and now it's just the first sketch of something that is not existing. And so it was important for me to work with a material you can all the time change. And now I transformed this into three-dimensional digital data, and this is available all over the world, so you can download these files, and you can, well, if you want, you can just print it, and you can see these organism sketches, but you also can work on them and change them. So you go and if you're a biologist, and if you want to think about, are we making this creature? Maybe it needs another tentacle. So you can change it. So it's like open source material, and it's it's in the discussion. It's not finished. It's just as far as I can go with it, and whoever wants to join can change it and continue and modify it.
Well, great. Let's do that. We're at the end of the festival, and I now want to open up a little bit for questions and statements, and let's come a little bit more into the talk with the artists. Does anybody have a question? Or yes, there is somebody. Anna. Verena will come with the microphone, and I would ask you to illegally just, yes, right.
Hi, it's very interesting to hear all about your works. I just actually would be curious for the movie, for the movie. Oh, hi. I think I really don't understand where the content comes from. So what we like, I think I don't understand. So I would really be happy to have two information about that.
Okay, Florian.
Yeah,
you heard it. You heard the question.
To get it right.
Okay.
Yes, I think so. So the thing we created is we created lots of containers, like digital containers that would interact with each other in a certain kind of way that was based on some sort of play or game. We would add a little game theory on these kind of things, and then we had like these different containers, and they would contain like video material, like design material. They would contain lyrics. They would contain music, and we would include some software that would some simple AI-based software that would write lyrics on the base of the lyrics, that would paint on the base of the video material, and that would score music on the base of all the music. And I think just concerning the music, there have, like, I think 27 people have provided music, and it was different. And all the, like I would say, the main engine is combining all those things together. And the interesting thing is that it's just some sort of watching a machine dream. And this is something you would say about it from the outside. But the more we exhibited the piece, the more we found out that the really interesting thing is that it's some sort of engine that kind of initiates the fantasy and the consciousness of people who are watching it, because our consciousness is a very powerful tool that tries to find some interrelations and interdependencies in between the things it's being shown. So if you see a banana and the car, you will find some narration that's in between those things. And if the things are more, if there are more things involved, then the fantasy or the consciousness is having maybe a harder time to like combining it. But it sort of creates an like an interesting state of being, and watching it can be somehow addictive, but it really depends on the people. So if you're capable of giving your mind or your consciousness or your fantasy into this project and into this process of watching it, then it can be really interesting for you. But this is basically what it is.
But that's very interesting as well, because in that frame, it's a kind of very Toulouse scenic project, because as long as in the moment you put the anthropos out of the Anthropocene and you replace it by the Holocene, it's about imagining new worlds and imagining stories, imagining new narrations, and fantasies, creating fantasies. That's the whole thing. That's the whole thing she's writing about. So in the end, you land at Donna Haraway's thesis or proposition.
Yeah, of course. I think the really interesting thing about Donna Haraway, like from my perspective, is that she kind of gives up on a theory, and she's really just speaking about processes, and those processes have changed a lot, and they will always change. Because I have the impression that she's only trying to put in words what the consciousness of manhood altogether is, how this consciousness is trying to narrate itself what is happening. And this is changing all the time due to the entities that are that are having impact on each other. And so I think whatever you try to look at, Donna Haraway is always really close, because what's her big thing is that she's outdated. She's impossibly outdatable, because she's really watching at the process. And this is something that was so interesting for us, that we thought we would create something we could understand, and then as soon as it would run, we kind of found out what we really would create, and then people would tell us what we did create, and then we thought we would understand what we created. And this is some kind of endless loop that is really interacting with each other. And yeah, I think the interesting thing is that while watching it, you can really lose yourself in it. And this is another thing that's interesting about Donna Haraway. The fact that she highly evaluates playing and dreaming, and these things we're unable to even really define for ourselves.
Yes. Any other comments, questions, dreams, maybe, from the audience?
I would have one more question.
Of course.
About, I saw some bits and pieces of a beautiful, beautiful cat. So I'm curious if you tried also your machines with that kind of plant.
It was for Spela, I guess.
Yeah, sorry, for Spela.
The cat plants. I haven't gotten to that advanced point yet, actually. But I will, step by step. Thanks.
Yes, I think we're all curious now what could evolve out of this, maybe also in the combination of your work, which is fits together in a crazy way, I guess, also in the differences between them. Wow. Yeah, Teresa.
Hey. Thank you very much, everybody, for this talk, which is really inspiring to listen to the different approaches on this. And I have a question that is like kind of coming back to the title, which is speculation. And I wondered, because I think it is so different that you're like finding answers or the products that you're doing, like the artworks that come out of it, but at the same time, you're all using this speculative turn, and I would love to know like on which kind of edge or question that you see yourself on this kind of research that it is definitely. So yeah, maybe I think it's for all of you, but just who has an idea to this, just grab it.
Anybody?
Yeah, I guess.
Yes, of course.
Thanks.
Start.
Thanks for the question. I think speculation or just, pushing this reality we encounter just a tad further, just a little bit with a smile is a great way to release ourselves from, very confining and sometimes anxious present. And I think my work isn't fantastic. It's speculative within, I think, very much the here and now, right? Only bringing alternative values forward. And I think that is something which is very useful for also storytelling. And this is where I think I connect with Haraway and what I actually took from her, right? It's like the question, who gets to tell stories? And because each person telling the stories places emphases on different points. And this work that I make with other people, actually, I didn't tell you about the huge amount of collaborators that each of these works has, right? So it's a product of people and plants and cats coming together and making these stories which are enacted or performed materially, actually lived, right? And that's sort of my contribution to a multiplication of these stories.
But actually, that's what she's saying in the book and in her text, that SF, what it ever meant to be, is telling stories and telling fact, working with materials and telling stories out of them and giving another gaze, another different view. And what I find very intriguing in all of your work, it has a kind of joyfulness in the speculation of different encounters and different relations between those things we taxonomically separate from each other. Always that makes me quite happy, actually, to see that. When I looked through all your sculptures, I laughed a lot because I found them very funny in a way, and the way you write about them, like in a very serious mode of a biologist, is like very joyful in a way, and that's all is about. And that's the same thing, as you said, Florian. You can lose yourself in the movie. That's the same state of mind which I had when I read the first time Donna Haraway's text. I was lost there in a productive way.
May I just
of course.
Like it's yes, I think it's imagining like other possibilities. Like I was I think I will just do this now. I just made a I would like to read from a little text, very, very small something. There was the Soviet super ape. 6 weeks prior to my first encounter with Lydia, I had received a phone call promising a lucrative job if I were to write a report on a controversial subject, as the woman at the other end of the line explained to me in German. I would be allowed to write what I want. I would just have to abide by certain rules. She had come across me through some previous work I had done, a documentary project in which I had gathered together the letters and manifestos of a biological evolutionary group, ANEMO, from the 1980s. I was agreed to offer and was sent a folder with a pile of papers. The detailed research protocol on an artificially induced pregnancy and its cause, Lydia's pregnancy, an ape-human hybrid in the belly of a 25-year-old cleaner from Eastern Europe. Already in the 1920s, somebody had tried to breed a hybrid being from humans and apes. In the search for a superhuman Soviet warrior, the Russian researcher Ivanov fertilized women with ape semen. However, the few growing fetuses quickly died, and Ivanov himself, without the genetic knowledge of today, died with the firm belief that with better medical equipment, we might have succeeded. Every race on this planet is a construction site. Professor Gravert. With her blonde curls and her gentle smile, the woman in her late 50s who picks me up for the meeting excludes a certain warmth. She says little until we sit down in her office. So then, I don't want to make it too long, so I'll try to be very quick with the, here. She's actually from Germany, but has been living in the Czech Republic for several years because of the project. A research center in Germany would simply be wrong for that what I want. She explains. The laws concerning embryo protection are some of the strictest in the whole of Europe. It is illusory to believe that it protects anything other than the people who are afraid of change. Last sentence. Professor Gravert is the head of the research group. She is also the one who called me in Germany. And so this is a story where somebody tries to crossbreed non-human and human apes, and because there was this case of Ivanov in Russia, he tried this, but he didn't know that the chromosome number with evolution changed so that he couldn't have this offspring. He did this with zebras and horses, but he couldn't do this with ape and humans. But now it's possible. And now just the law makes it impossible. So it's against the rule, but it's possible. And I just propose, if we want to come across our boundaries, we can think in any direction. We can also become animal by mingling up and having common offspring with not human apes, like. So this is, I don't know, like it's like this, maybe it's not funny. And I think in a way, yes. So there are some projects that are playful, that are funny. Some projects may go into other direction, but they all have this, they all want to question, do we have to be the way we are? Do we have to accept ourselves the way we are? And if we accept ourselves, maybe we have some other potential, I don't know.
But that's the question she also raises. How is kind of examining, breaking down the boundaries between humans and animals, collaborating, co-working, creating together, how is that an open space, or how is that restricted by laws and animal rights and all those stuff? That's what we talked about it before. So we're talking about evolution in the end, creating new options for evolution and finding to deal with that planet we left in that state. Are there any other questions or ideas? Yes.
Sorry, my brain is just like running by these things, because I think it's really interesting, this differentiation between, does speculation lead to fiction or does it lead to actually science, what you're doing, Spela? And also from there, is it like, what is the thing that we're proposing and that we're looking for? And I feel that in this artistic process, there is this kind of potential to just have a beauty in a possibility that is coming out of fiction, just to see it and to imagine this and then being amazed by this. But also on the other side too, and I think this is what you're doing in this, like maybe documentary or scientific way of art, to be precise in what we can't feel in the ways that, like in the abilities that we have as human beings until now, like just by our bodies, like to have an AI that is actually doing the translation for us. We can't, because we can't do it on our own. And I think this is really interesting, because there's so different approaches and just so at the same time different beauties that are coming out of it. And just want to say this. I think it's a statement.
That's a very good statement. Actually, it's a good statement for the end of the discussion. Are there any other questions or statements?
Can I just
quickly
respond?
Yeah, please.
I just wanted to say that the work that I do, even though it might be humorous, the humor is just sort of a container. But actually the urgency is one where I'm really concerned about how, the status quo is what the status quo is. And actually, like we heard about the transhumanists, Elon Musk, and this sort, this is sort of where the train is heading. And I think at this moment, we can't afford not to engage with the technology that is existing and within which we are living. So there is, the playfulness is, like I said, it's a container for really pertinent and oftentimes super depressing issues. So it's also hacking and resisting through this principle of Audre Lorde, right? With engaging with the erotics of the everyday, precisely because this is how we maintain some sort of power and joy and just like energy for life, and not give in to the melees that otherwise would overcome us. Okay, that's it.
Yeah, well, that's it. That's exactly the point where we were heading in the whole festival, actually. What is a narration of an Anthropocene telling we have to rescue the planet, whatever that is, or that what you said, open up the space, open up the mind, having possibilities about it, on the basis of a real deep concern of how this way can go on in the next years. Florian, you will make a proposition tomorrow, which is called Introduction to the Future Self. Finally, we get to know the future self tomorrow as a closing for the festival. Will you give us a little teaser on that project as well?
Yes. Well, I really like what you said, Spela. I think not that only art has always been politic in a way, science also is. And I think they all have a great interdependence towards a vision for a planet everybody wants to live on, or everybody or every species or every entity on this planet finds a world that gives it space to grow and space to be. And what I had in mind when I started my project, which is a sort of transmedial project in between music, literature, video art, and costume, was that maybe the last really huge technological boom for humans was how we kind of got along with atomic energy. And the instant that those people who are really trying to discover it were basically white militarists or scientists that were paid by them, led to the fact that atomic power was basically beginning to have an impact as a weapon, and then it would try to be used for other things. And I think that all these new upcoming technologies and powers like nanotechnology, then of course machine learning and AGI and biotechnology, the more people are getting engaged in these kind of processes, finding out things and playing with these things, the more likely it is that everybody finds a place in this whole new development. And so I tried to come up with a narration that is giving people an impression of what very dystopic and very utopian places and ideas and visions are heading towards us. And this is something I called Introduction to the Future Self, not because I think that it's the same future self for everybody, but this is kind of the way I'm approaching it, and something I'm so curious about this. I will be something like an alien on stage, and I just got the mask from the designer. And if you want, I can show you the mask. I just look at it for the whole time. I just stand right there.
Please do that.
Okay, then I get it right now. It goes like this.
In between, I didn't know that you were starting with the atom bomb in your research, or as a kind of beginning for the project, but that's exactly what we talked in the first discussion, the starting of the Anthropocene. Oh, well. I think I could also find that in Beth's and Annie's house somewhere.
Yes.
At least the colors. But that's kind of crazy, because we were talking with Michael Wagreich on Thursday about the beginning of the Anthropocene, and he said that's exactly the moment where the atom tests in the Pacific took place, and you can find isotopes in the sediments. So that's kind of crazy that the circle now ends tomorrow, beginning and coming back to the atom bomb in the end. So I'm very intrigued. Thank you for having you. Vielen Dank fürs Dasein. Das war Artgenoss innen, Supremacy, Collaboration, Empowerment und New Speculation. Reiner, Maria, wir wollten ja eigentlich alle, dass ihr alle da seid, und due to Covid sind es dann doch wieder nur 2 auf der Bühne, du und ich. Spela, schön, dass du da warst und da bist. Florian, wir sehen uns morgen. Ich hoffe, wir sehen uns auch. Wir gucken jetzt gleich The Future is Not Unwritten von Steinmaßl, beziehungsweise das kann man ja eigentlich so gar nicht sagen, von der KI. Zumindest einen kurzen Ausschnitt von einer Dreiviertelstunde. Wir entlassen euch wieder nach draußen, ihr kommt wieder zurück in einer halben Stunde, und dann gucken wir diesen sehr, sehr tollen Film und werden zumindest eine Dreiviertelstunde lang die Möglichkeit kriegen, uns da drin zu verlieren. Ich bedanke mich sehr bei euch. Danke für das Dasein. Großen Applaus erstmal. Jetzt der Film und morgen dann der große Festivalabschluss Introduction to the Future Self. Und dann wissen wir auch, wohin die Reise geht. Vielen Dank fürs Zuhören, fürs Gucken und fürs Hiersein. Schönen Abend noch.